Hi, I'm Marina Lafrosia.
And I'm Monica Birch. And this is Summer Reading List.
Where we take a look at your favorite
or least favorites
required reading books. And today we actually have on our first guest, our best friend Alia Fareed.
Hello.
Is here to help us discuss George Orwell's dystopian classic, 1984.
Alia,
Yes.
Nice to have you here.
Thank you.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I have known Monica and Marina since I was in middle school, and I've never been much of a reader, so I'm excited that they invited me on. Yeah, that's about it.
And Alia and I hated each other.
A little bit.
Just kidding.
And here we are.
Just kidding. We still do.
Now we're all on the same couch together.
We're all in this
Cozy.
together.
Okay, so I guess we're going to go ahead and again start off with our experience of the book and if we had to read it in school or if we didn't.
And I will start because I actually didn't have any experience with this book in school because I did not read it in school. And that sounded weird, but I just feel like, I don't know, I was kind of upset I didn't get to read it, which is the nerdiest sentence ever. But yeah, I really wanted to read it in high school and instead I did not get to, so I liked the excuse to read it. Because I'm trying to get through all the classics, which is a really boring thing to say.
Right.
Exciting.
But I
That's
want
a
to
big
do it.
English major.
It is like a big flex. Like, I've read the classics.
Which one's all of them?
All of them. Every single one. Anyone you can name. But that's me. So yeah, I was excited to get to read this. Alia, what's your story?
I was required to read this,
Ooh.
but I did not. I just read SparkNotes, and if my lit teacher is watching, I'm sorry, I guess.
You probably passed, it's okay. SparkNotes is a great source, to be honest.
So I just, did the assignments, forgot about it. So actually reading it this time, well, I didn't read it. I listened to the audiobook.
Which is the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. So this is my actual first experience with it because I blocked out any memory of it from high school, to be honest. So
Blocked out any memories?
Did
Almost
you-
like you were indoctrinated by Big Brother?
exactly.
Stop it. There's no war in Bossing Say. Did you like it though? At all?
I did like it. It was very interesting. And I feel like
No,
a
when
lot
you
of
first
people...
read it?
Oh, no, I thought it was boring.
When she
Right.
first
When
read
you
it.
first read the SparkNotes in whatever
Oh.
grade you had to read it
Oh yeah, I was like, ew, I don't like this at all. There was actual books I did enjoy, but this one was not one of them.
in?
And I feel like it's a hyped up book, and I don't know.
I actually, not to get too deep into it, but I felt the same because everyone told me so much about this book that I was expecting almost way more surveillance than there was. I don't know if that even is possible. But I was like, everything has surveillance everywhere. But it's like they know what has surveillance, if that makes sense. So anyways,
Right.
for me it did feel hyped up this
That
time
makes
too.
sense.
But yeah. Marina?
Okay, so I actually did read this one in high school. It was in 10th grade, I
Bravo.
think. Thank you,
Good job.
thank you. So I was 15, 16-ish, and we had a whole dystopian section of that class, which is why we read this book. I think this was the
Doesn't
first
every
one
class.
That's true,
Yeah.
nowadays.
Dystopian is everywhere.
But yeah,
That sounds
this
weird.
was one of those books that I actually did, I know you said, a lot of people liked it, and I do remember this one being generally well-liked by my fellow 10th grade
Yeah.
peers when we were discussing it. I don't know if necessarily everyone read it or if they were faking it, but it did seem
I was
like at
faking.
least everyone was interested in the plot and
Yeah.
what it was trying to say.
Which is surprising.
Which is surprising for many 15 and 16-year-olds.
It's
but
intense, but
yeah. But yeah, so that was my experience reading it then, was that it seemed as though everybody kind of generally enjoyed it. Yeah, that was how I felt about it in school. I'll go on and just go ahead and
I was
say my
gonna say,
experience
should
with
we
it
discuss
now.
this experience now?
I felt like I still enjoyed it probably the same amount. I'm not wow, this is my favorite book ever. But I do think it has some important things to say, and it's probably something that maybe everyone should read at least once or listen to the audiobook. But I don't think that it's that different from reading it now as a 24-year-old versus reading it as a 16-year-old. Maybe only the difference is I can now make my own opinions versus what a teacher might be telling me the themes of the book are.
Which is what we love about this podcast.
Yeah.
Because even though we could say anything we want, you can come up with your own opinion.
Yeah, exactly. So I think maybe that's literally the only difference. I feel like maybe I enjoyed it about the same.
That's good.
Mhm.
Alia?
I wish I could say that this book opened up my third eye, but it did not. I enjoyed it. And I know like a ton of people talk about it and use it as like references for like modern day stuff that's happening. So it was
Which
nice.
we'll discuss.
Yeah. It was nice to like finally really understand the depths of it. But I mean, yeah, I liked it. That's my take.
You can say you don't like it.
No, I liked it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like average.
I would say, yeah, I enjoyed it in the end. Like when it was done, I was like, that was good. But while reading, I struggled. Like I usually say I don't like audiobooks, and because I don't like, I'm not like an auditory person.
It's bad.
It's just like that's how I am. It's not like I dislike people who do audiobooks, except Alia. But this time I actually did have to download the audiobook and listen to it while reading, because it's just like I couldn't hold my focus at all. Even though I was like, this is interesting, and then I completely wanted to change what I was doing. I was like, and I'm done. And just to say a little bit why I think, my little theory, hypothesis.
Yes.
If you want to know.
I do.
After doing the scientific method. Not really, disclaimer. It's just that, like, I don't know, there's a lot of exposition and, like, just too much exposition.
There is a lot of exposition.
Which, if anyone doesn't know, it's just, like, over-explaining. Like, just explaining and explaining and explaining. I do a lot better with, like,
getting
dialogue
right into there.
and just getting right in. Like, I can do some exposition, because I say that, but, like, I love Pride and Prejudice. And I could read all that exposition all day long. But it was something about this one, it just felt like the same thing was said for, like, 20 pages. So the story was good, but just getting through it was a little rough.
Right.
And I was also hoping for a much deeper meaning, and I didn't find much one deeper than, like, the usual ones talked about, and that annoys me in a way. Because I like the challenge of finding something different, and I couldn't find it. So if you find it, let me know.
Okay, so I think, again, like we did last time, I think it's important that we discuss the author a bit, and where they come from, and how that might have something to do with their writing. So I know you had something ready, Monica.
I do. Okay. And you guys can obviously jump in whenever you want. But it was interesting to see, again, I always like looking at the author, because, like Marina said, it tells a lot about it always interestingly connects to their background.
Right. And if it helps, like, if you don't understand something in the writing and you get to the end of a novel and you're like, I don't understand, that was terrible, maybe, like, go ahead and research the author.
Yeah.
Because it will actually tell you a lot about what you just read.
Exactly. So, like, George Orwell, for example, this is just a fun fact, but his name is not George Orwell, it's Eric Arthur Blair.
Right, George Orwell is a pen name.
Yes, didn't know that. Kind of shocked me for some
reason. I actually also didn't know that until I did any research for this show.
Did you know that?
I did not, at all. But I honestly like his original name.
I feel like no one, really?
Eric Arthur Blair.
It is interesting, yeah, that could be. That's like an author name.
It is.
That
is, yeah.
But what interesting though, they talked about in his biography that people outside of his family didn't know that either. Like his friends thought he was George Orwell too. It just wasn't like maybe like his close friends knew he was George Orwell, but for the most part, knew he was Blair. But for the most part, everyone thought he was George Orwell.
That's an interesting.
An interesting thing. So first of all, he was born in India, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
I forgot the city. Oh, Burmese. Yes, I have it written here. Burmese. He was born in Burmese. To a soldier of the British Army back when the British had total control over India. But he was born there. And that actually is part of why he has the mindset that he has, because he kind of saw the, like, ruling class versus, like, in the caste system, and he didn't like it. He didn't like that there were caste systems. He didn't like race barriers. He didn't like that if he wanted to do things with his friends from Burmese, or anywhere in India, that there was a racial issue for others. So that's actually part of why he wrote some of the books he did, like Animal Farm and 1984, which I thought was really interesting. Especially because people will use this book as, like, an attack against those exact things.
Or, like, any ideologies that they don't exist.
Yeah.
Like, don't agree with.
Exactly. Like, they're like, I think it's this ideology.
Right.
And it's like, well, if you read about his life, he actually was trying to go against those things. So it's just very interesting, and it's good to learn about him. And what's actually interesting is...
Sorry, really quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
We said Burmese. That's, like, if you're from Bengal.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Thank you. So he's Burmese.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's okay.
I was like, this felt wrong as I was saying it, so I'm glad you fixed that.
That's fine.
We make mistakes here. We're not perfect. I put my shoe on one foot at a time.
Me too.
So, just as like a quick thing I'll read, he became against communism, so-ish, after he experienced fighting against it in Barcelona. And so again, that goes back to like, a lot of people think, oh, this book's anti-communism, or like Animal Farm's anti-communism, which Animal Farm might be. We haven't read that yet, so we'll go into it. But what's interesting is I picked up on is it wasn't so much the idea of communism that bothered him. It was the idea of not having total freedom.
Mm-hmm.
So that could really be any political ideology that
Right.
distorts freedom in any way. So I think that's something people have to keep in mind is the, like, and we'll talk about this more, but his opinion wasn't so much anti-communism because of communism and its point of views, like I said, but about the lack of self-control and like things like that. And in fact, the book is openly anti-Nazism and anti-Stalin. But that's what I already said. But yeah, it's very interesting. And no, I actually didn't say that because that's different.
No, you didn't.
I'm not gonna lie, I always get the two mixed up, and then I realize it as I say it. I did it earlier today. I will mix that up for the rest of my life and then fix myself, but I don't care. So my favorite fact though, Orwell was under surveillance.
Oh,
Spooky.
Did you know that? I actually didn't know that until I looked up stuff about Orwell, and I thought that was just absolutely hilarious because like a guy who writes an entire book about surveillance is under surveillance. And it was actually because, and if you read the book, this will sound a little familiar, he went to a poorer area and stayed in an apartment there, and people were worried he was getting indoctrinated with communism. So the government started paying attention to him more. So he does have like a back and forth communism in his life. It's very interesting.
Yeah. If you do want to read any more about him, he has like a lot if you do any research.
Yeah.
Like that's someone who you could just read about for a long time. So we don't have, unfortunately, enough time to go extremely deep into his background, but that's just scratching the surface. So if you're interested, I encourage you to do your own research on him.
But that's mainly him. And a lot of that stuff would make more sense. Like, makes the book make more sense.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
All right. I hope everyone got that.
Okay, so I guess we will go on and we're going to talk about a few plot points as we did last week, just so that you have a general outline of the book.
Girl, last month.
Oh,
it's been a minute.
I said last week. I meant last episode. I'm so sorry.
It feels
this
like
will not be a weekly thing, just for anyone
we can't
who
read
thinks.
novels in a week. Nor do we expect you. Because...
Yes, exactly. So we want you guys to read with us. If you don't, that's okay. But we encourage it. Okay, so last episode, if you recall, we did go through plot points of the novel so that you have a general idea. If you did or you didn't read, you need a refresher of what happened in the book all the way from the beginning to the end, so we can kind of talk about what happened in between, and then we will go into some deeper themes if we don't touch on them while we're talking about the plot.
Got that?
Got it.
Do you got that?
I'm a listener. I listen every month.
The 1 month we've had the show. Thank you so much.
That is every month.
Okay.
Yep.
So we open the novel. Our main character, his name is Winston.
Which I thought was interesting because I immediately was like, does this have a connection to Churchill? But
exactly.
Didn't Google that. Maybe you will while we're talking.
Maybe.
Maybe. But low-key could have a connection.
Okay, so Winston, he's our main character.
Winston Smith.
Right, the most generic name.
Yeah,
Smith. Okay, so to open the novel also, we get him explaining, this is a little bit like later, but he kind of explains where he lives. So he lives in London, and it's still called London, but everywhere else that he describes is not recognizable to someone like us who lives in this day and age, because London is the only town that he gives a name that sounds familiar to anything we recognize.
And the architecture is totally different too. Like, were they pyramids? Am I remembering that right?
So, like, the buildings that they make for the government,
like the Ministry of Love.
Yes.
And,
the buildings that they live in very much is like London.
Regular,
like they're regular apartments, and they're they're falling apart because they're so old, which is
they weren't kept up.
Very much London to this day. But we do have like those new buildings, which are the pyramids, which are all the ministries,
which is like weird to picture, like decrepit old London, Not that London's decrepit right now, but like a decrepit version
Sorry,
of London.
London listeners.
Sorry. But then like 4-ish, was it 4 random pyramids, but then also like ruins randomly everywhere, because they're like church ruins. So that was always an interesting thing for me to picture.
Yeah, it is very interesting if you try and like examine, the new modern things that they try and add in the book with what we maybe know that still exists to this day, which is kind of interesting.
Even though ironically this book is not written modern.
Right. I mean, it was definitely written way before 1984 and way before 2020.
Did you, Alia, have any like picture in your head of what it looked like? Or was it like what we said?
Yeah, it's kind of what you guys said. I was thinking of London, but just like gross.
But just gross.
Gross. I don't know why the pyramids were so interesting to me, because like that would be such like a weird standout.
It's just like that's such like an eyesore compared
exactly.
to like everything that exists there. So that stands out already.
Yeah.
Whereas like we know what it holds in the novel, which we'll get into, but yeah, it's just interesting to picture that. So we do have so London is part of Oceania, which is like a country. So there's only like 3 big states, which is what they call them in the novel. So it's Oceania, which comprises of like the UK and like the Americas, so South and North America. So like the US and UK were like, let's get together and be Oceania.
Like random islands.
Right, and just a few scattered things.
I was happy, by the way, I'll just say real quick, that they explain this, because I feel like I've read a lot of dystopians where they don't explain what's going on in the world. Yes, and I'm like, okay, is just this one country like crazy and the rest of the world
That's what's so great about reading fantasy novels. They always have that big old map right in the beginning.
I love that. Like, I can't remember, for example, like in Hunger Games, do you remember if the rest of the world was messed up, or was it just the US became Pan Am?
So I actually don't remember in the Hunger Games if they even mention the rest of the world. Because I remember what the map of Pan Am looks like, but I don't remember the rest of the world.
We'll have to look that up. Maybe we'll do an episode. But like an example like that, like I can't remember. Maybe they did, but like say they didn't, I always would wonder like, okay, what else was going on? And I know there's been movies like that where like they've broken out and they're like, oh, the rest of the world is
doing this. Yeah.
So I enjoyed the explanation.
Yeah, so then the other 2 states besides Oceania comprises of Eurasia and East Asia. So East Asia consists of China, Japan, and then it says the Mongolian regions. So
bad.
And then Eurasia comprises of like Russia, which has also taken like mainland Europe. So that stretches from like Portugal, and they say all the way to the Bering Strait. So that's like generally.
And were they the ones that had parts of Africa, or
actually, that's a great question. Let's see.
Because it was only either way.
I think yes. I want to say, if we're wrong, I'm so sorry, but I think East Asia is the one that has part of Africa.
But it was only the top part, so that was the one little snafu. I think Marina mentioned it to me earlier, like, what's going on in the rest of Africa?
Yeah, I was really curious because we'll probably go into this a little bit later, but there are some places where they're like, oh, it's just people who are slaves, so we don't really care. And it's like, oh, okay.
Most likely.
But, yeah, exactly. But yeah, so they have some places of Africa, but then they don't really tell us what the rest of Africa is doing, or maybe they're just ignoring everything and they're like, Wakanda, living in utopia, but we don't know. They don't really tell us. So that's all the countries and the states that we have, as they put it in the novel, that are like the main players of the game.
Just 3.
Yeah. Okay, so then the first thing that we have with our main character, Winston, so he kind of just goes through his regular day. He explains like I don't know, coming home from work.
He gets home, he goes he hides in his alcove.
Yeah, so he
sees the Big Brother poster.
Yeah, so what happens is that everybody in Oceania has like a little television screen that records everything they do.
Are they in multiple rooms? I think they're in every room, right?
I want to say yes, but at least Winston's description of where he lives is that like everywhere except for the small little alcove that's supposed to like be held. Area? Yeah, was that's all right. Being able to seen by that, and it's called a, I'm sorry,
telescreen.
Okay, so the little television set telescreen is where they're broadcasted everything in the morning. So all their like propaganda, which you can clearly see it's propaganda as soon as you
their little workouts.
Yeah. So they get like their morning announcements, all the things that have been happening in the wars and everything. So that can record everything they're doing.
It's like live because it's like it's like a Zoom, because at one point he's not stretching properly and the lady's like, "Come on, Smith."
Yeah, come on, do this.
They're definitely paying attention.
So when the telescreen is actually off, it doesn't record them physically, but it can hear everything they're saying. So as long as you don't say anything out loud, technically you could be doing anything as long as it's not.
But they don't have an ability to turn it off like the
Right.
recording. It's always on.
It's always just there. So it's omnipresent. So
big word.
thank you. So the first instance we get of Winston in his apartment, he describes it. It's pretty beat up. It's like
disgusting.
Yeah, the way he describes it, it's like it's almost decrepit. So he hides in his little alcove. It's supposed to be like for like a bookshelf kind of thing, if you can picture that in a wall,
But
so
they
that
don't
the
have books.
telescreen can't see him in that little divot. I was
Divot.
gonna say ditch, but in the divot in the wall. So what he does is he actually has this diary that he bought from a little shop that's kind of like a pawn shop, has little odd knickknacks and things, and it's like something that he never has seen because they don't keep things like that anymore. They don't have anything with blank paper for people to write their thoughts because that's not something that you do.
And I thought it was weird from like a writing standpoint. Like not weird, but like if I were to critique George Orwell, I am. Don't worry. I almost was like, sorry, Marina's face just got me there for a second. No, but I feel like he talked about getting that diary, but I kept wondering the whole time, okay, but where would he get a diary? Where would he get a diary? Like, if everything's watched and this is kind of illegal, like, what would happen? So I was kind of like, later when they said it, I was happy, but I was like, I wish this was said in the beginning, because I've been spending this whole time like, okay, but where did he get this?
Yeah, so they kind of describe like him writing in this diary, or actually he's actually staring at it for a while. He doesn't know what to write. He's very stressed about the idea of putting his pen to the paper.
Because he's technically already broken the law just by having it.
So the idea behind having the telescreens is so that everybody can be surveillanced by the thought police, who will essentially, if you do any wrongdoings against the government and Big Brother, which we'll talk about in a second, they will like come after you. So just having the thought of doing something is already a crime, which he explicitly says before he puts the pen to paper at all. So he's like, having this thought is already a crime. I need to go ahead and actually write.
Might as well. I thought that, sorry, I'll just say this real quick. I thought something that was interesting too with myself, like interpreting the book, is when I heard thought police and before it was explained, I thought it was like they found a way to actually kind of read your thoughts.
Oh,
I was like, that's
interesting, yeah.
Because that's how they kept talking. I was like, thoughts are illegal. And I was like, well, how would you know?
I think I thought that way too.
Yeah, honestly. I was like, how would you know? Like, so they must have some way to know, like, what you're thinking.
And that actually goes to show, which I'm sure we will continue discussing, but it just goes to show, like, how indoctrinated everyone is in the society, that they feel as though almost that their thoughts can be read.
They definitely
like, just having that
happening.
Thought, he said, was a crime. So if he's already committed that crime, I might as well continue what I'm doing. You
wonder if they made them think that, because then they would commit the crime.
Right, like otherwise they would not act on it.
Yeah, I just thought that, like, if they wouldn't act on it if they knew, like, no one would know. Like, he probably wouldn't have written in the diary if he thought, like, no, my thoughts are sacred, but because he's like, well, they're not, so I might as well write. Now they have hard evidence.
Yeah, and so the first thing he actually writes in the diary is just, like, him talking about one of the war propaganda movies that they're showing. So he doesn't actually have... What I think is interesting is that this showcases that he doesn't have any of his own individual thoughts just yet. It will develop later, but when he first writes in the diary, all he can write is exactly what's been regurgitated to him over the propaganda. So he just kind of writes out the whole premise of the plot of the war movie, which is like, oh, everybody's so excited because they're blowing up children in one of the other countries, which I don't remember if it was East Asia or Eurasia. They flop which ones they're at war with. But it was one of those, and then it was talking about how exciting it is because they see all the people who are getting blown up in these countries, and that's literally what he writes on the page over and over until he's like, he comes back and he kind of reflects and he wonders why he's written this. So again, another crime. If we're the thought police here, that's 2 crimes. Three crimes he's already committed.
Time to be vaporized. He's already dead.
And so then what we get at the end, I want to say, of the chapter actually, is that he actually has written over and over again, like, down with Big Brother. I think that's the first thing he writes in there, or like questioning Big Brother. I'm not sure if it actually is down with Big Brother, but it is like something along those lines, which we can go back and fact check. But so he writes it over and over again in big font. And then once he kind of comes out of his little space, he's like, oh my gosh, like, what have I done? because he hears knocking at his door, and it's the neighbor, and they have like a normal neighborly.
It's Down with Big Brother.
Down with Big Brother. I did remember that
Page
correctly.
18. If you have this book.
And
We cite our sources here.
And so then he just, you know, is worried about what he's written, how that's going to come back to haunt him, and what that means for him as a person.
I just remembered that's what the guy says in his dreams at the end.
Oh, yeah.
Didn't connect that till just now.
So everything that happens in the beginning of the novel comes back full circle in the end. Pretty much everything.
Full circle. It really does.
It really does. This is one of those ones that it really doesn't leave any...
Don't let things surprise you.
Yeah.
Realize what they're saying in the beginning is what's going to happen.
Literally what they outline in the beginning happens. That's it.
Them saying, we're going to die from this. Yes.
In one way or another, they are going to die.
Eventually,
or they're going to die. Yeah, so then after that, we get Winston going to his job, and then he interacts with other people who work in the other ministries. And so he actually...
I think they're in his ministry, but they're in different sections, because he works in the ministry of, like, changing
Right,
things.
that's what I mean.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
sorry, I said that incorrectly. But...
How dare you? How dare you?
So it's like they all work in different departments.
I'm trying to remember which it's definitely not Ministry of Love. Definitely
He works
not Ministry
in
of
Ministry
Peace.
of...
It's like
he
literature
works
related.
in...
Yeah, because he's like changing like words.
He
and
changes
stuff.
like what's in the Time magazine and like the
he works in the Ministry of Truth.
Ministry
right?
of Truth.
Yes.
Oh, that's right, because it's all it's all like
yes. Okay, so he works in the
flip-flops.
Ministry of Truth,
Mm-hmm.
and what his job is changing the news.
Making the news fake.
Fake news.
Fake news. It's here, so now it's real.
Or
so
is it?
Who knows at this point?
so what he does essentially is he gets little notices of what news to change. So every time, like we said earlier, they kind of flip-flop between which state they're warring with at the moment. So one moment they'll be like, East Asia has been who we've always been against. Like, they've never been our ally. But really, like 2 years ago, they were allies. But they're just changing everything. So now the people will back them 100%. And then they won't question, like, at all that they've ever been at war with the other country. And just that it's always been like this.
Big Brother can never be wrong.
Mm-hmm. So what Winston does is he goes back and he actually changes news reports and anything that people can look up, or any information that's available to the public is tampered with every time something changes.
I also wondered if that's why he seemed a little more insane about it than other people. Like Julia, who we haven't talked about yet, even though she works in that ministry, she's in like the fiction department, where he is straight up changing the news. He's changing facts that aren't even facts anymore because they've already been changed over and over again. So I feel like that's partly why he's so susceptible to realizing how corrupt things are, especially because I know there is a moment where he like clearly calls out, he remembers the day something happened and the date was changed, but I just think like even before that, his entire job was changing facts. And so I think that just like, that would get you.
Yeah.
You're still human.
For sure. Like, that takes a toll on him, for sure, as we see, like, because he is who we get the narration from in the novel, it's still from his point of view. So every time he gets one of these pieces of when he gets one of these pieces of news and he changes it, he actually throws the old one into, I don't remember.
A furnace.
Yeah, but they call it something specific that I can't remember. But essentially it's a
the
furnace.
The newspeak is hard to remember. Winston can't even remember it. So
so essentially it's a furnace, and so anything that he changes, he throws into a fire, so it can never be remembered again. And so the only person who essentially can remember it is someone who does that job, like Winston, and that takes a toll on him a little bit as he tries to remember. Yeah. Because he can't remember what's really a memory or not. Mm-hmm.
Fahrenheit 451 vibes.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, it almost feels like, right, if Fahrenheit 451, if the guy never discovered the book, and spoilers, sorry.
For 4.
And if then, like, society just kept moving on, because at this point there are no books. Mm-hmm. The books that there are fabricated by people like Julia, and even then they're, like, barely books. It's like a computer wrote them.
Like, nobody reads anything, except for the news that's, like, pumped out.
And you have to read that.
Mm-hmm. So that's, like, a requirement. So after we kind of get like what he does and like why he might be somebody who's questioning things, especially because of his job, he actually has like a small interaction with a woman who he actually just has like a memory of. So they all have this kind of cafeteria area. So all the departments kind of go there for their little lunch break.
And they do the hate 2 minutes together also.
Yeah, so every day they have like a little 2 minutes like hating on
It's disturbing.
Redirect.
Yeah.
It's like redirecting your anger at one thing. A scapegoat.
Yeah.
If you wanna
So
use
it's
the
actually
word.
against a lot of times it's against someone who they Goldstein was a leader of like a rebellion back in the day, the Brotherhood.
I watched like a clip in the movie, and it was really creepy.
What
Like
was
seeing
it?
everyone so angry. It was just like the hate
Oh
speech.
yeah, like that.
It was really creepy and like it scared me honestly.
Did they throw things at the screen?
Yeah,
because
and
that
they
was
were,
something
like,
that really
screaming
captured me
and,
in
like,
the book.
It was like flying out of
That's
their
what
mouth.
they said. Julia like threw the shoe or something.
Yeah.
And hit him right on the face.
Yeah.
So they all throw things at this Goldstein, who was like the leader of the Brotherhood, which is essentially a rebellion against the party, which we will find out also
I
has
thought
another
what
name.
was creepiest about that too, which is obvious, but like that Winston himself was even like, I don't like the party, but something about the energy of the hate makes me genuinely feel it. And like that collective mindset is just so creepy.
Yeah.
And like
that hive mind kind
that
of thing.
hive mind. And I think that's, again, that goes back to that's what George Orwell doesn't like. That's, I think, what his base comes down to is don't have the collective mindset, don't have the hive mind, because it's like you have a right to not. But even in those moments, even someone who's so obviously against the party, he is yelling at Goldstein and he's so happy to see Big Brother, and it's just like, this is weird.
Yeah, it is very strange. And he actually like comments on like we said, Julia is a character who becomes a recurring character in a second here, but he comments on her, and she's just like a younger woman who's about 26 years old, and he comments on her and how she's reacting
So
to
weird.
the hate, and she's the one who actually like throws something at the screen, and he feels like sort of infatuated with her in a strange way,
But like angry he
in
is.
an angry way, which is kind of upsetting.
It was
A
very
trigger
true, yeah.
warning if for any sexual assault or anything.
Yeah.
But the way that he feels about her is that he's like, oh, she's a beautiful young woman. I've had fantasies of smashing her skull in and raping her. And that's it. Like, and that's in a passing thought. That's not even like a deep thought that he has. That's like,
It's like, that'd be nice.
yeah, that's exactly how
So
it comes
weird.
across, which is like very scary.
It's creepy, and then I even thought too, like, that's what they were taught to think.
Yeah.
Like, they're
Yeah.
taught to hate, I feel like they are taught to hate sexual activities for pleasure.
Yep.
So I think when he feels attraction to her, it's immediately turned into like, I need to kill her.
Right, so
So
that
just
goes
like-
with the whole bashing your head
Gross.
in with a rock kind of thing. Yeah, so we
Which
actually
sounds
do
fabulous.
learn later that he was married, and actually technically still is married to a woman named Catherine. And she was so indoctrinated by Big Brother in a way that he wasn't, which will continue to go on, that he's not completely indoctrinated, but that anytime that they would have sexual relations, she was like, oh, we only do it like to have children, like that's what Big Brother says.
It was like she didn't want to, but yet she was the forcing figure.
And she said it was
just
for
weird.
the party. That was what she described it as.
And what they were taught to say, we find out later, that's what Julia was taught as well.
Yeah, so that anytime they do that, it's for the party, so they can have children and continue on the indoctrination. So him having these thoughts is already, again, a thought crime. But because they're not
And yet
supposed
what he
to
was
have these
taught.
kinds of fantasies. But yeah, so he sees this woman, and we later learn on that her name is Julia, so we'll be referring to her as such. So a little bit later in the novel, once we go through a few of his days at like work and like how his life is, and him writing in the diary a little bit more, so he sees Julia at work one day, and she's wearing a sling because she's been injured.
Did she have
or
a sling on the
something.
first day too? I feel like was she not
I
injured when
don't
they first
know.
saw each other?
I don't think when she threw the things at the
Okay.
person that she
I
was
don't know why.
injured.
Oh, it was the sash I'm thinking of. Okay.
Oh, we were thinking of the anti. It's not called
It was-
anti-sex. It's called anti-something else.
It might be.
Oh, you know,
Basically,
it might
it's
be.
anti-sex.
Right. So she's part of like the anti-sex youth organization.
Yeah.
We'll find
Which
out
is
the
part of why
actual
he
name.
didn't like her.
Right. So, she comes in to work with a sling, and then she runs into something and falls to the ground, like face first. They describe her like face planting on the ground. And then he's like, wow, that looked really painful, and she's pale. Maybe I should go see if she's okay. And then so he instinctually asks like, oh, are you good? And then she just like looks at him and says like, yes, I'm fine, and takes his hand like to be helped up. And she actually hands him discreetly a small slip of paper.
Drug deal style.
Right. And
Movie
so
drug deal style.
like as she gets up, she just walks away. Like she doesn't say anything else. But he has the paper in his hand and he's very aware of the paper, but he also is very aware, as we see like throughout the entire novel, that big brother is always watching, and he actually describes himself having a facial expression that doesn't give off any kind of emotion other than like he's content. So he kind of always has on this mask. So he just continues to have that, and he knows that the paper is important, so he saves it, but he does not read it right away because they would know. So he actually saves it until later on in the day at work.
It's interesting that he's like taught these things, but really he's just taught how to avoid them.
Yeah.
How to evade.
Yeah, so then he actually, eventually during that day, he does open up the paper.
When he's working.
I love you.
I love you.
So Julia has written on the paper that she loves him.
Ooh. Crazy.
Yeah, so he becomes infatuated with that idea.
So soon.
Just that she has contacted him at all.
Quicker than
because...
The Bachelorette.
Ooh. And then just that he doesn't like understand how to really react to that. And he doesn't know how to communicate with another person because they aren't really allowed to have any relationships outside of like their fake little marriages just to make more children, and so they aren't really allowed to have friends per se. So, you know, it's
definitely not lovers.
Right. They're not supposed to actually like people when they get married. It's literally only to make children, and that's it.
Something I thought interesting too the whole time he was after he gets the note, by the way, he tries to figure out how do I contact her. And when she wouldn't show up, I thought what was very obvious that this character is a very selfish person and kind of made him a little bit of an unreliable narrator. Going back to that.
Saucy.
Was that instead of thinking, oh, she could be taken up by the thought police, oh, something bad could happen to her, it was, she doesn't like me anymore, she doesn't want to come to the canteen. And it's like, you're in a dystopian society. Like, this girl could be dead. But what you're worried about is that you're ugly. I mean, I guess I get it, but like...
I get it.
Yeah, so also, I guess we should point out, we did say that she was 26. Winston is supposed to be like almost 40 years old.
Yeah, he's like 39.
Yeah, like...
I mean, I guess... I don't know. I can't do the math.
So he's supposed to be about almost 40. So like
we're not mathematicians
late
here.
30s. So even when he was describing her, he actually says like, obviously she would never be with someone who is like me because I'm old and gross. So yeah, so like Monica said, it's interesting that his first thought is not like, oh, maybe she was vanished or vaporized. She just doesn't like me anymore.
Like him.
She's not interested.
She's ghosting him.
Or it's interesting that he doesn't think that maybe she has malicious intent. Like she's trying to bait him into something.
He never questions that.
He actually kind of is just like, yeah, you know, it can't be anything else except for that she loves me.
I wanted to get into that theory a little bit later.
You can go ahead and
do
touch
it now.
on it now.
Okay, well, I was kind of reading online that people think that this relationship was not real and that, well, clearly she didn't really love him because they barely even
understand what that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that giving him that note, she had intent for him to get caught in the act of sin or what's the word? I don't know.
Yeah, just
adultery.
like, adultery.
Yeah, so I thought that was an interesting take because I actually didn't even think that until I read it online, and I was like, oh my gosh, that makes like
wait, she could have been
sense.
Yeah.
Something that made me think, like, when you mentioned this, she mentioned this earlier to us, and I was like, that's a cool take. I don't know if I agree with it though, but I do wonder, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but when he left, spoilers, but you should have read, when he left being tortured and he saw her, were they out, like, they were free, right? They were out and about.
Like they were free,
but
as
like
much as
she
they could
was
be
roaming.
free. Yeah.
Did she have any like signs of like abuse? I can't remember.
Well, no, they don't describe that. Just that.
So then you do like I at first,
or at
was
least
like,
because Winston is our unreliable narrator, we don't.
He
get
could have not
any,
noticed. Yeah, that's true because he doesn't really pay attention. But I mean, he does describe her body a lot, so you'd expect he would kind of describe it like, oh, her bosom was messed with,
her hips.
Her hips
are mentioned a lot, or how pale she is, how weird she is.
He would have probably, if she was bruised, I feel like he would have mentioned like, oh, her pale cheeks have a rouge to them now because of the beatings.
Yep, he would have.
I said
Yeah.
that like Moira Rose, I feel like. But no, so that does make me wonder, like, maybe that theory could be correct, because why was she out free, uninjured, seemingly fine? I think she still wanted to love him, and he was like, nope. So it is like, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So all of that kind of happens, like it stumbles, like we've kind of gone on a little bit towards the end. But it kind of all originates from her originally giving him this note. And so she has like a lot of sneaky ways to get around to places where they can meet. And they never come, they never come or go the same ways. And she has like almost like an entire map of everywhere in her head, which
like
to me seems insane. I don't know about you, but I can't get anywhere without like a GPS.
They kind of like explain why, because she does so much volunteer work that she always did like the hikes. Yeah. So she understands like the countryside.
And where there aren't any microphones or anything to be detected.
So it could go either way. I haven't decided yet if I think she's a spy.
She is sus. She's sus. She could be the imposter. We don't know.
We might get rid of her.
But yeah, so it is also interesting. Something that I kept thinking every time they did have like a rendezvous in one of these fields, was that I don't understand how, if everybody's under surveillance all the time, if they just go off the grid for a day and suddenly reappear, how that doesn't seem suspicious.
So I feel like that's what I meant in the beginning, is I was like, how are they able to do that? If they're so under surveillance, how are they able to do things like that?
Yeah.
How are they able to hide in the church? How are they able to go anywhere that they went?
And this like kind of goes back into something that they say repeatedly, is that like, I know what we're doing is going to cause us to be killed and we're going to die because of this, but we're going to keep doing it anyways. Which is also interesting because they take all those extra precautions to not be caught, but if they're saying they're going to die anyways, then I'm interested in what they think the point of all the extra safety is.
I guess maybe more time.
More time is what I
like, they don't know which one's going to trip them up, so might as well just keep trying until they get tripped up.
Yeah.
Because it's not like the woods caught them. If they had stayed in the woods, they might have been fine.
If maybe they kept changing their locations, but...
Yeah, they stopped. She even said that. She said we always have to change, and then they stopped.
Mm-hmm. They kind of get lazy.
Very lazy.
Yeah.
They enjoy domestic life too much.
So then, as Winston and Julia kind of go on to, like, continue their affair, she kind of has, like, I don't know, so she's giving him all these ideas about, like, we're against the party, but then he kind of questions her a little bit, kind of pokes her for, like, some deeper meaning to that. And the only reason she's saying she's doing these things and, like, continually meeting him, having sex with him, is just so that she can be against the party. So he thinks that she kind of has, like, this idea, like, we're taking down the government by doing these things. But anytime she's pressured into talking about the government or anything, she kind of just gives up and is like, no, I don't care about that. But
it's just teenage rebellion.
It's just the act of this is rebellious, so I want to continue doing it.
Where he's like... he doesn't openly say it, but he's like ready to be in the Brotherhood.
Right.
The second he knows it's real, he's like,
And he kind of like wants her to be more than what she is. So he's like projecting what he wants to be onto her.
Which he does a lot, even not with her.
Yeah. So he's kind of just, I don't know, creating this idea in his head of what she is and what she symbolizes, when that's really not what she is telling him at all.
How unreliable.
You can never trust them, these narrators.
Never trust a narrator.
But yeah, so another question that we kind of had coming up, going on with the plot as they continue like meeting up and things. So they actually do visit the shop where he bought the diary. And the guy who runs the shop, his name is Mr. Covington. And so
which is in like a lower class area, by the way.
Right.
To like
So it's in the lower class area with the proles, who are
the proletates.
Yeah, who are all like the poor people who the government doesn't even really care about that much because they're so poor. They don't have any time to have any rebellious ideas.
So, like,
or
ironically, they can do whatever.
Right. So
could be religious.
The poor people are the only people who can do whatever they want, and they actually live pretty normal lives. But they're just always extreme poverty.
So, like, can they?
Yeah. I mean, like, all they have is each other. Yeah. So.
And like we can go into it more, but something I think we all agreed on is the hierarchy of need. I can't remember if that's exactly what it's called. But I think the government doesn't care about them as much because they're stuck in the bottom level of they're trying so hard just to find sustenance and food, water, shelter, that they're not even in the realm of thinking, okay, should we overthrow the government?
Right.
That they know as long as they keep the proles down, they'll never have to worry about that.
Right. They'll never have any resources or like enough time to be able to try and do something.
They'll never
like
even
that.
like think about it enough to like cause an issue, because that's what we're jumping around. That's what Winston kept thinking the whole time. He's like, it's got to be the proles that fix everything. Like there's 85% of them compared to like 2%.
And he keeps saying the future is with the proles.
Yeah, but it's like if they, according to this theory, if they stay that low, they're never even going to get to the idea that maybe they could change things. And he even tries that. He tries to question people there on like what it was like before, and they don't care. They're talking about the old man. He's talking about beer. He's talking about darts. He's talking about going to the bathroom. Talking about, oh, I miss wearing top hats, but like never talks about whether communism was better or capitalism was better.
Because Winston kind of tries to do some snooping, which is like he goes to a pub, which is where the old man that Monica was saying that he talks to. He tries to ask him about his past because Winston himself cannot remember anything like
he was a child
before like his childhood. Like in his early childhood, he can't remember anything. He just knows that like Big Brother used to not exist, and then suddenly it did exist, and he doesn't have any memories before it did exist.
Even though they're taught that Big Brother has always been and will always be,
which he knows is a lie, but he doesn't understand. Right,
double think.
So he doesn't understand where that kind of starts and begins. So like we were saying, he goes to this area, which is like the poor area where the proles live, where Mr. Covington has a shop where he bought the diary from. And he actually has a room upstairs. So he actually asks him to rent this room so that him and Julia can kind of have their own little space, their own fake little house. They can live however they want. They can do whatever they want to do. But yeah, so they kind of rent out this little space, and this is like what we were saying, they keep meeting here. So they no longer take the extra precautions of going somewhere different. There's only 2 entrances, so they can go in the front or they can go in the back. There's not really anything they can continue to do to mix it up like they were doing. Like
store owner is definitely
completely different routes to go to this random field somewhere. They're just like, we're going to keep meeting here. You go in the front, I'll go in the back. That seems good enough. And so they do get kind of lazy. They kind of live this fake domestic life. He actually buys another item from Covington, which is like a paperweight that has like a piece of coral in it.
I was going to ask what you guys thought of the significance of that, or if you thought anything more than what he already describes.
Kind of projects onto that, and he's like, wow, I wish me and Julia could just be like this paperweight and lost in this world.
He felt like they were, like the apartment was the paperweight.
Yeah, like that was their own little biome.
I was just curious if
to do.
Cute.
I was just curious if there might have been another meeting, but
I mean, yeah.
There could have been.
I mean, if you think about it, like the coral is trapped.
Yeah.
So even in his idea of domestic bliss, it's still trapped.
And do you know, like, when it gets broken is when they're captured. So that's interesting. Ooh. That's when it's freed. Interesting.
Capture is freedom. War is peace.
Yeah, so Big Brother actually has a few slogans. War is peace is one of them. The other one that they kind of repeat a few times is the 2 + 2 is 5.
Freedom is slavery.
Right.
And ignorance is strength.
So these are the things that kind of get pushed to them every day on the telescreen when they have those 2 minutes of hate.
I do have a question to you guys too also. So, again, spoiler. Again, you should have read. I'm just kidding. I'll stop doing that for
your
everyone.
homework.
Just kidding. You can read Spark Notes. We're fine. We won't care. You're not being tested. Anyways, we're always like constantly shown the slogans: war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength.
And these are like in all caps bolded, by the way,
yes,
in the book.
Intense. I'd show you, but I don't think it'd show up. But then we see Goldstein's like explanation, or at least like the Brotherhood's
his manifesto.
Kind of and he, in his terms, explains it, and I'm wondering, like, is that what you guys think the party means by that? Because he makes it seem like, okay, well, they like war because it keeps you distracted, and so for them it creates peace.
Right.
But, like, do you think that's what the party is saying?
What his titles were saying, or?
But do you think, like, that's what Big Brother is also trying to say? Or do you think Big Brother is just confusing people with doublethink?
So I think Big Brother is kind of using these things differently than how Goldstein uses it in his little manifesto section. Once Winston reads his book, because I think he just utilizes these phrases to kind of
to explain
break it down and like why the party is saying that. But I think Big Brother does it in a way where like they don't actually do it so that they think about anything. They kind of just are told this is what it is and that's how it should be. And I think them saying like war is peace kind of goes back on that what is it, their language, the one speak? Double speak. Yeah. Newspeak.
But part of newspeak is doublespeak, and doublespeak is contradicting.
I was gonna say doublespeak is what I was trying to get at.
Do I like my paperweight, by the way?
Love it.
It's a camera.
But yeah, so like the war is peace is doublespeak in its way where like obviously those things are not the same. Yeah. But Big Brother is equating them to each other. And
almost
that's
to confuse, at least on the surface.
And that's their idea of like with their language newspeak. As we see, they kind of describe like the dictionary gets smaller and smaller because they get less and less words, less and less vocabulary, and the words are meant to contradict themselves. So one word can be its own like antonym.
Super good. Or no, it's good plus good, super good, ungood, plus ungood, super ungood.
Yeah.
Super plus ungood.
Super plus ungood. So
it's like math and language.
So they're trying to get rid of all the extra things, and they're just saying like one thing means the other when it really has no correlation at all.
And I thought what was interesting is how he described Smee. I like Smee, but you like Smee.
I think it's Smee, and I just said Smee because of Peter Pan.
Smeagol.
No, his name is Smee in Peter Pan.
No, I'm thinking of Lord of the Rings.
Oh, I'm thinking about Peter Pan. We're on two different.
Different. No, but I thought it was interesting how he was like, you can't, with a new language, you can't even have a thought crime because you can't even have the thoughts, which is really interesting because I feel like that happens, like, education, little hint there, like, the more language you know, the more you can express and emote and even understand your emotions, because, like, I feel like sometimes if you don't know, like, think of a baby might not know language, so they just cry, they don't know how to express themselves. Right. When you grow, you know how to think like, oh, I'm sad, instead of just like sobbing uncontrollably. We still do that, but we can at least explain why now. Yeah. So I just thought that was an interesting point.
Yeah, so then, so we have all of that. We have them meeting in the room over and over again. We have their little safe area that they think is safe. Julia kind of brings some like forbidden things up there. She gets a hold of like real coffee and real tea
and real chocolate.
And so they get to like indulge in all these things, but only while they're here in this room. So again, like we were saying, it is like their own little area. Like he was kind of projecting onto that paperweight. It is their own little world.
He loves to project. And I get it, I guess, like if you're stuck in that environment, like wouldn't you?
I mean there's nothing else you can do if you're somebody who does have any like
thought.
Yeah, if you have any like rebellion against like the party, then there's nothing you can really do except for have thoughts about what it would be like to not be there.
You saw more of Julia being less rebellious than him because her biggest thing was, oh my god, I get to wear rouge or blush, or I get to eat chocolate, where he was like, okay, but like rebellion. And she was like, no, I've got chocolate.
So he was kind of ready to take like that next step into kind of overthrowing and kind of changing things, like maybe for the better. But Julia was kind of just content with being like, the things we're doing are rebellion and it makes us happy and we get to be alive, so that's good enough.
I think also it's important to remember though, she's younger, so I think she's been more indoctrinated. Did I say that
right? Because she didn't have more life before Big Brother existed, whereas
because she even
Winston has.
She doesn't say she doesn't want the party to go. She says there's no way. Like she's like
she actually doesn't believe it.
Yeah, she's like there's no possible way the party could be changed. Like it's always been the party, so that's why she doesn't have such strong convictions. Or with him, he's like, no, the party wasn't always here.
Yeah, and he's like, it could be different. Yeah, so we get kind of another example. I know we said he bought the paperweight. There's a picture that he's kind of like fascinated with that they have in the room that's of a church, and then they kind of talk about it a little bit, and then he shows it to Julia because he thinks it's so beautiful, and then she's like, yeah, I'll go ahead and I will clean that up like eventually, so that way it's nice for us here. It doesn't end up going well, but that's just something important to note for a second from now. So as they continue this affair, Winston, like we said, keeps trying to get Julia to like say something negative about like Big Brother and the party more so than just like they tell us we can't do this, so I want to do it. Something like that she's actively against the government. So he actually takes her to visit one of his coworkers, who his name is O'Brien, and
O'Brien invites him there.
And O'Brien, invites him there because they kind of, like I said, they aren't really friends because they're not really allowed to have friends, but they are as close as you could be to getting a friend at work.
And O'Brien's also inner party, which is the upper class.
Right.
So I think that's even harder because, again, Orwell's trying to talk about caste systems.
And like we said, because he was born in India.
Yeah, so it's very, like, caste system related. Like, I mean, there can be some changing between, but...
Yeah, and like you said, like, the Hunger Games, if we go back to that kind of comparison, it is, like, the capital versus everybody else in the district.
Maybe, like, capital versus, like, District 1. So, like, he's not the poorest, but he's definitely separate.
Right, so they kind of have these ranks that they kind of have to climb up to get to anybody important. So O'Brien is kind of the top.
Yeah. Katniss would be the proles.
Right, exactly.
I just nerded out a little bit on Hunger Games.
So he actually takes Julia to visit O'Brien because he is convinced, like, O'Brien invites him there, like, kind of discreetly under the terms as, like, oh, I love your work that you do with our words, with our newspeak. I have this dictionary. Would you like to come see it? You can come see it at my address, which is this. And he actually writes it on a piece of paper, and then Winston memorizes it and burns it because they're actually not supposed to, like, keep any detailed notes of, like, where anybody lives or what anybody does. So that's also kind of an interesting little note. But he immediately memorizes it, destroys it, and then he takes himself and Julia there. And
which shows he has a good memory.
Yeah.
So maybe his
his memories that he keeps trying to repress actually are correct. So they go visit O'Brien together. And do you want to kind of tell us, like, what O'Brien tells them?
I mean, O'Brien basically, to them, confirms, yes, there's the Brotherhood. However, you won't meet them. You'll always be probably working by yourself. We won't help you if you get caught. All that good stuff. And they get to see the ever-talked-about book of the Brotherhood's theories and ideas, like what we call their manifesto, although they don't refer to it as that.
Yeah, they don't say that, but I feel like that's basically
that's exactly
what
how
it
I was
is.
thinking.
Yeah.
And he's like, you can't be part of the Brotherhood until you read this. And he was really excited to read it.
Yeah, and their whole idea was that, like, how they kind of said you're going to be working alone is, like, what they tell him is, like, so that way when you do get caught, and they don't say if you get caught, they say when you get caught by the party and when you're tortured, you're not able to even give up any names even if you wanted to, because you actually won't even know who's in the Brotherhood. Like, he will only know O'Brien's name, and that's it. And O'Brien will only know the people who brought him into it, and that's kind of how he describes it. So that's kind of what he tells them. And Winston goes on to read this little manifesto to Julia, and she actually keeps falling asleep in their little apartment.
She does not care.
Yeah, their little apartment above the little shop. She continually falls asleep as he tries to get her to care about anything. And so he doesn't, it's strange because he kind of doesn't take it, like, offensively to himself. He's kind of just like, man, I wish she cared.
I feel like he's very much wrapped up in his own ideas and his own, I mean, I want to be annoyed because, like, modern day, if I was around someone who was like my idea or the highway, I would be annoyed. But then I have to think, like, okay, but, like, he is in a society where he has no freedom, so I feel like the little freedom he gets, he's like takes it.
Yeah.
Because I would probably do the same.
So they continue to go back to this little apartment. And what they do is, like, they keep meeting there. Like we said, they don't continue to change their rendezvous points anymore.
Although I think the last time they meet there is when they read the
manifesto. It is. So actually, when the manifesto is read, and she's asleep once he finishes whatever he wants to read. So he reads through, like,
which is where we get a lot of the fun, intense, political opinions of probably Orwell.
Yeah. So
just a lot of politics in that.
After that, he goes to sleep as well. They wake up, and you kind of want to describe what happens next.
It's nighttime, which for me, I was immediately on edge because we didn't say this yet, but he always talked about how the thought police come at night. So in my mind, I was like, okay, so anytime it's nighttime, I'm gonna be on edge.
Right.
And sure enough, he reads this manifesto, and next thing you know, he's like, oh, it's getting dark out. And I was like,
Nope.
this is not good. You need to get out of there. And instead, they're just like hanging out. And sure enough, what are they doing? They're looking out the window, talking about this lady, talking about the proles. Really, he is, and she's just kind of listening. In fact, I thought it was funny. He kind of comes to the realization of like, oh, she's beautiful. And Julia's just like, basically like, she's fat. How is she beautiful? And he's like,
Yeah, okay,
not exactly great female representation, but anyways,
Mm.
Julia's not a very good character.
She's very 2B.
And I've been wondering like this whole time, and I haven't figured out yet if that's supposed to be Winston's like point of view of not being very like aware of others, or if Orwell just writes women that way. Because I know like if you saw Frankenstein, part of what we talk about with Frankenstein is like Mary Shelley makes fun of how men write women, and like so I couldn't tell if like, okay, is Orwell doing that, or is he saying Winston's like that? It's hard to tell.
Exactly.
But yeah, so they're doing that, and I think they say, are they talking about something? I can't remember. But all of a sudden they hear a voice behind them, and it's the telescreen that they didn't know was there.
And where is the telescreen?
Behind the picture of the churches, which is very interesting too.
Right.
So it's behind a picture of churches.
Right, which we had mentioned before that Julia was like, oh, I should clean that for you. If only. If she had
I guess
done that.
They would have been caught then, but...
Yeah, they would have
in that
been.
area.
But also they could have stopped committing more crimes than they already had.
Yeah, they probably would have gotten like...
Not
labor
that
camps
right
instead of death.
They do describe, Winston kind of says, like, people who disappear sometimes go to labor camps and sometimes they disappear altogether, which we can infer that they are murdered.
Dead.
Yeah, so we can kind of think, like, maybe if they would have caught themselves earlier, maybe they would have been sent to labor camps instead of...
Death. I mean, we don't see their death, but, like,
right,
Winston basically says, this will be death.
So they're caught.
By Marina, who is it by?
What?
The shopkeeper.
Oh, he was a thought police.
He was
Mr. Covington. He was in on it the whole time.
The whole time. He was.
I thought you were asking me just to say thought police, and I was like, we just said that.
No. It's so interesting that he like lets it keep going. Like he could have got them in trouble with the diary.
He actually could have gotten him
Target.
Yeah, so he actually could have gotten him in trouble. Like Mr. Covington, like we said, he is the shopkeeper who sold him the diary.
Could have gotten in trouble.
He could have gotten him in trouble just for buying the diary. Like we said, that itself was a rebellious act. Like they're not supposed to have something that they are able to write their own thoughts in. He could have actually called them just because he frequented the shop to look at like that little paperweight. Anything like that, because they're not supposed to have those kind of free thinking things that Winston was having. But it's interesting that they kind of just let him keep going. Like he
they wanted to see how far he would go.
They wanted to get the Brotherhood crime. They didn't want just like petty, like, oh, I want a diary. It was like, no.
Yeah.
Again, like Target.
If you don't know, Target will accumulate how much you've stolen and then get you when you hit felony charges.
Yes. So you don't get petty theft, you get felony theft.
Yeah.
Anyways, I believe that's true. I don't know.
We'll see. Target employees, let us know.
Let us know. We're not gonna try. We just heard about it, like always said. No, but that made me realize another thing is that another reason why Winston's so unreliable is he constantly judges people incorrectly.
Yeah.
He thinks O'Brien is his friend. Spoiler for the next part we're gonna talk about. He's not. He thinks Covington's safe. Right. He's not.
He keeps judging. Like, he keeps saying, I don't have any reason to trust these people except for I really want to. Yeah. And he kind of says, like, they could be anyone. They could be evil, and I don't know. And they are.
I feel like that could lead to another explanation of why Julia could be evil. Because if he trusted O'Brien and he trusted Covington.
Yeah, Covington.
And that's why... And he trusted them, and he was incorrect. What's to say he's not incorrect about Julia?
Yeah, so that kind of
glad
goes
you brought
back
that
to,
up, Alia.
Is Julia actually in on any of this?
Was Julia also trying to get him caught with the book of ideas instead of just the diary?
Most definitely. I don't trust her.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, so they're captured. We do get Winston seeing O'Brien again, who, like we said, is not his friend, as it turns out. O'Brien kind of tells him, like Winston asks him like, oh, they've caught you too, and then O'Brien kind of says like, oh, they've caught me a long time ago.
Which, again, just to interject, do we think that means he has always been a part of the party? Or do we think that means he was trying to be part of the Brotherhood, got caught, they brainwashed him again, and now he works for the party? What do you guys think?
I think it's
my
the
opinion,
second one.
I think it's the second as well.
Okay, yeah.
That he had to be brainwashed again?
Yeah, and he's like, well, now I'm actually in this, so
Yeah.
here we are.
Because I felt like, I mean, I can't remember if I'm projecting this, but I felt like he was kind of sad while saying it too.
Yeah.
Like it was
It's
melancholy.
just, at least the way that we get it described from Winston.
Yeah.
It
That's
kind of,
true. Winston's not good at judging people though, so
yeah,
who knows?
so at least how we see O'Brien say it through Winston's eyes, it kind of seems as though he's implying like, I was once where you are, but now I'm here today because they've caught me, and now I'm a better, or what he thinks is a better person now because of it. So yeah, he kind of tells him there's room 101, which everybody knows what's in room 101 is what they kind of keep telling Winston. And they...
Don't you think it's funny that like every room ever is 101?
Zoe 101?
Zoe 101. Like I just
is that what we were thinking?
Not just Zoe 101, but I feel like whenever there's something, it's like something 101.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I know it means like in like school stuff, it means like the basic class.
Yeah,
but it's
right.
just interesting that even in this it was like 101.
Yeah. So, what is in room 101? Wait, why did I say 101 so weird? What is in room 101?
Their deepest fears, right? For torture.
Dun, dun, dun.
Whatever your deepest fear is, they will torture you with it.
Right. And so we kind of had earlier in the novel, we had Winston kind of describing a bad nightmare he's
That
had.
reoccurs.
That is a reoccurring. So it could be something like from his childhood that he's repressed. Because that's kind of how we get a lot of his memories from his childhood is in his repressed dreams. So anytime he dreams something, it's like something that he realizes actually was true. So he has like a nightmare about rats specifically. We don't really actually get any detail regarding to why.
Rats are just disgusting.
But he's actually terrified, and
They're not.
when he has the nightmare about rats, he wakes up like in a panic and like even has to tell Julia like, "Oh, I'm sorry."
He
like I
cuts
had a
off
dream.
why they scare him fully, which I notice Orwell tends to do that like right in the part where we're gonna get the final secret of like why the party does things they do. It's cut off.
Yeah.
And I'm curious again, going back to Frankenstein. I know Mary Shelley didn't say what the elixir of life was because she doesn't know. So I'm wondering like if Orwell did that because he just straight up didn't know what to say, or if we're supposed to figure it out on our own. So that's another thing to think about. But like that is something authors can do. Is like if they don't know what to say, they just leave it as like a secret,
and then
have to,
we have to kind of figure it out.
Panic, like what's the answer?
What did they mean by this?
The writer's
like,
just
well,
sitting
I
there
don't
watching
know.
the chaos, like Regina and George.
Right, like that in Community when he brings in the pizza and everything's on fire. Yeah. Okay.
Perfect. I was thinking of Regina George like watching the evilness that she's created of,
or the meme of like everything's fine, dog is on fire.
Me trying to figure out how to create life.
Right. Okay, so they kind of, like we said, they have their greatest fear in there, and so he kind of gets tortured, and then O'Brien actually tells him it's your turn to go to room 101, and we are going to torture you, and they actually bring out like a cage of rats. And just, like, the sight of them makes him so disturbed enough to be like, no, like, don't torture me. Like, you should torture Julia instead.
Which is a crazy thing because, I mean, we kind of saw it coming. But he talks about the whole time about, like, how important Julia is, how they both said they can give each other up, but they'll always love each other. So you might think, oh, okay, he might still love her, but he gave her up like he's supposed to.
Right. So, like, yeah, like Monica was saying earlier, when we get, like, their first interaction in the field, they kind of say, like, oh, like, when we get tortured, when we are caught for doing this, we will give each other up like we're supposed to, but nothing that they do can make us stop loving each other, which, as we can see now, we don't really know if they even loved each other, which we kind of already touched on. Like, do they even understand what that is, or what that entails, or what it means? I would say no, that they do not.
No. Yeah, I agree with that. No,
But they just,
I think it was taught out of them.
I feel like they just don't even know what that is. Yeah.
I think they might still be in that like lower levels of like the hierarchy. Like they can't even understand who they are, so how can they love somebody else? Kind of situation.
So they kind of just cling to whatever they have, which like if you remember, the first thing that Julia wrote to him was "I love you" on that slip of paper. Right. He actually didn't even know her name when they met,
or her eye color.
Yeah. And so...
But her hips.
Hey, he knew what those looked like.
Beautiful dark brown hair.
Yeah.
That he wanted to bash in with a brick.
Right, if we recall that.
Bad.
Yeah, so it's just interesting that that's something that he was like, they can't stop us from loving each other, when, like, moments ago he had just learned her last name, like, right before he says that.
He never learns her last name, does he?
Oh, actually...
I don't think so. I think it's always just Julia.
Maybe I'm just thinking of when he actually finds out her first name.
Correct me if I'm wrong, audience.
But yeah, so he, like, didn't find out. Yeah, because he mentions, like, I don't even know where she lives. Like, I wouldn't know where to find her. So he actually knows nothing about her except for what she volunteers to him as information. Which is another kind of strong point for that she was kind of a plant the whole time.
But what's interesting is the second he gives up Julia, isn't that when he's allowed to go?
Yeah, so once he kind of gives up Julia, he kind of, like, right before that, he's having, like, dreams, and like we said, dreams are kind of a reoccurring thing that helps him to realize...
And they tend to be truth.
Yeah, so his dreams kind of bring his own truth, and that's how he remembers things, and one of his dreams that he starts having is that he loves O'Brien, because O'Brien is the only one who can actually stop the torture, even though he's the one who is torturing him, and so he kind of, like, you know, conflates the ideas, like, incorrectly because of that. And obviously that means whatever torture methods they are using are working, but they kind of, I don't know, like, it describes how much they are changing the way that they think.
Is it almost like negative reinforcement? Am I using that correct? Because it's like,
yeah,
with Julia, it took away his anger towards the party because he had something else to focus on, and with O'Brien, it takes away his torture.
Right.
So I don't know if it goes into the ideas of, like...
I think that's the correct terminology. I don't know, any psych majors want to help us out?
I feel like...
Sound off in the comments.
Maybe I'm wrong, but, like, Stockholm Syndrome?
Oh, yeah, it's
like,
definitely Stockholm
kind of
Syndrome,
thing, yeah.
but I'm just curious because even with Julia it happens, and I know, like, his reinforcement is, like, when the bad is taken away from him.
So when
he
the
wants
bad
whatever
stops,
takes away the
like,
bad,
yeah,
whatever the
exactly.
bad may be.
So then there's actually a point, like, right before, when we were talking about the rats, right before the rats are brought out, they kind of, like, O'Brien is telling him, like, it's not enough to say that you don't, like, actively hate Big Brother. You actually need to love him. And so he's like, no, like, I don't care. I don't believe those same things that I did before. But O'Brien's like, no, you need to love Big Brother. He needs to be, like, the only thing in your life. And so they kind of continue to torture him until they bring out the rats. And then once Winston finally says, no, torture Julia instead of me, he, like, O'Brien knows that that is the point. That was, like, the breaking point for Winston.
Kill love.
Yeah, so to kill that love, and then he knows that he will be able to replace that with the love of Big Brother instead.
And I think that's why they partly said why there wasn't allowed to be love, because they didn't really want to give people an outlet for their frustrations. They didn't want to give people an outlet for their love. They wanted it all to go towards the happiness, to go towards Big Brother. They wanted to be able to control it. And in romantic relationships, they can't control it. You know, they can, with the hate, they can control the hate. With the parties, or not the parties, but, like, the events, they can control that. But the second there's real romance, as real as it can be in that kind of situation,
right?
You know, Big Brother can't control him anymore.
Yeah. So then, so as the novel ends, we kind of just get him saying how much he does love Big Brother. And he even agrees to the 2 + 2 = 5 scenario.
Jeez.
So he has been
Hurts my
fully
brain.
indoctrinated. He says, I love Big Brother. He is allowed to be released because of this. And we see that he's fully now indoctrinated into the society that they've created.
To the point where he doesn't care about Julia at all, even when they see each other.
Yep. And
So
that's just how the novel
bleak.
ends. Yeah. It
But
is
we
a
love
bleak
a bleak
ending.
ending. I for some
We stand
reason
a bleak
do like,
ending
I do
here.
like those for some reason. I don't know, like, I was upset when I heard it, but then I was like, nice.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know why.
And see, like, the thing is, like we were saying, one of the big motifs in these, like, in this story is that everything he kind of says earlier is foreshadowing to how things play out in the end. So everything that they kind of predict and how they say, when we get caught, this will happen. And they're right to an extent. They don't know how far it can go, but they know they're going to be caught, and they are.
Which I don't know why I was so surprised, because I'm so used to books having, and I think this might be why I like such bleak endings, because they finally surprise you. But I'm so used to like there always being a good outcome that's like, no, they're gonna survive not getting
Right,
caught.
yeah.
Even with other novels, like other dystopians, you think, I don't want to say which book it is in case people haven't read it, but like there's another dystopian where like you think the protagonist is caught and then in the epilogue you realize, oh, they escaped, they're fine.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, okay. But like even in this one it's just like, Big Brother. Which we actually didn't really, I realized we didn't talk much about Big Brother.
Okay. So now that we've kind of finished like the majority of the plot, do you kind of just want to dive into who Big Brother is?
So this is Big Brother.
And for those of you who are just listening, we kind of have some Big Brother posters up.
We have a bunch of them. I can't count them because I can't do math. 2 + 2 = 5 would definitely be
correct. Oh, I was gonna say I agree.
As a numbers person, Alia can endorse 2
My
+ 2
mind would
=
just
5.
be like, whatever. No, I can at least do that. Anyways, Big Brother is the leader of the Insong Party. We have a debate of how to pronounce it, even though 2 of us listen to the audiobook.
It is kind of just, they kind of refer to them as the party, which is what we've been referring to on the entire podcast. But it is like Insog, Angsnog.
Which stood for something else. It's a combination of 2 words. I believe one of the words was socialism.
Yes, but I don't know.
Dun, dun, dun. We'll get to that. But Big Brother is basically the figurehead of the party. And my question to everybody and you guys, and I think we all know the answer, but like, is Big Brother a real person?
I'm gonna go with no. He was created to scare people.
I agree. He's kind of just like an idea.
And I wonder, like, do you think people know that? Like, maybe not the pros.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe they do, but they don't care. But like, do you think even the inner party people know that?
I'm not even
sure. I would assume no, because they're so into it and so manipulated that they would believe anything.
And I do like in the very beginning of the novel, Winston kind of describes what the Big Brother posters look like. So these Big Brother are watching you posters are plastered everywhere throughout anywhere in the entire society, buildings, inside buildings, everywhere. He describes him, and the way that he describes him kind of seems as though maybe that is like the ideal man. Like he describes him as like a strong, mustachioed.
Love that word for some reason. I'll keep saying it
like
over again.
He like the way he is like choosing to describe him is like he's like the cream of the crop,
chiseled, older, so he's wise but not too old, but he's not strong.
Exactly. So like they obviously did this on purpose of like what kind of person they wanted to represent Big Brother. But yeah, so I want to say it is more of an ideal, and it is something that they do choose someone who is like the perfect person to kind of intimidate people who are lesser than.
And I kind of wondered it too, because like in his department they create fake things, and including in that is actors. So it's like, okay, well, even if they did need to like create a poster, I know for the video I'm pointing to it, but like if you read the book, they describe the poster that literally could have been an actor if it's not a cartoon. I don't think it was any. It was a picture of a real man.
Yeah.
But it's like they have actors, they have voice actors who can match things. And I actually was wondering too, like, is everybody Big Brother? Because his entire job is to write things.
Yeah.
And it's Big Brother saying it. Like he has to mimic Big Brother to
like
the point
he's making
of
the words of Big Brother.
Yes, to the point where he's literally writing Big Brother's speech, and that's what his entire department does. She writes books that I feel like are at least endorsed by Big Brother, if not written by him. The news is based on Big Brother's opinion, but it's really just them. So it kind of goes back to that idea of like you have to have the collective.
Yeah.
It
is kind of like they're so scared of this Big Brother figure that they become him.
Yeah, like they. I mean, that's what the kids are.
Yeah,
they show that with the kids.
We
like,
do kind of.
The kids
like
are.
Maybe we should talk about
absolutely. Yeah, so they describe.
Like they would rat out their parents.
Yeah. Do you want to say that?
Oh, I mean, it's pretty much that they would
like the reason that they kind of enforce these people to have kids is because kids will be completely indoctrinated and they don't know anything else, so that they will actually a lot of times. Like the parents of like children who are now like growing up will rat out their parents for thought crimes. Yeah, which we do see with his neighbor that I kind of mentioned earlier.
Imagine
that was like that was my one
That'd
surprise
so
actually for some reason, because I was like, I didn't expect that guy, and actually to think about it, Winston is so sure that he's not going to get picked up, and he does. So again, do we trust Winston?
No, absolutely.
Then that might pluck a little hole in your thing that you talked about how. Everything that happens in the beginning is true, because he says without a doubt this guy's not going to get caught.
Yeah.
And then he does.
Yeah.
So what's going on, we don't know. Only Big Brother knows, but they're all Big Brothers, so really no one knows.
Yeah, except for the people at the very top, who we don't even get to know.
Are there even
those
people at the very top? Or are they all just like
Is there anybody above O'Brien?
I
Are they
am
all just
curious
trapping
of like
themselves?
the backstory behind this, but
Yeah.
obviously we don't get that. So
Yeah, like how it started.
yeah, exactly.
If
I'm
any
curious.
novel needed a prequel.
There was
Yeah.
I can't remember, I read something where there was Goldstein writes about like kind of how it started,
Mm-hmm.
how it was like
like the beginning of
they transferred from like capitalism to like
Mhm.
socialism, and then they transferred from socialism to this. And this is another, again, like people, I think Marina or Alia said from the beginning, like people in real life tend to use this book for their own political ideologies and as a background of like, no, this book explains why. Which, first of all, even if it did, I feel like we need to keep in mind this is an author, it's a writer.
Yeah.
Like, how much does he know about politics? Did he study political theory for his whole life? Did he, like... I mean, not saying that, like, you have
and
to
it's
be
not
an expert,
necessarily
but...
like he could predict how these political parties would act
Yes.
as we know them now.
Yeah, exactly.
Versus when this was written in
So,
1940 something.
It's a good warning, but,
Right.
like, people need to stop, in my opinion, using it
Right.
as, like,
I would say that it shouldn't be used to further any specific political ideology,
Yes.
but that we could all use it as a warning towards like a dictatorship or like
totalitarianism to be specific,
Yes,
because that's
yeah.
actually the one thing that can be talked about.
right, and that he was actively against. So
Orwell
like
was
we
really
talked
against
about
it.
how he did flip-flop between like what kind of political beliefs he had as he went through his life,
But he
but he
hated
always was
totalitarianism.
always against.
or like leadership.
Mhm.
Again, that's why I said the only thing he could really, they wrote about why he didn't like communism was because the idea that the people in that group of communists, not even communists together, but like in that group of communists,
At least
were
how he knew
suppressing.
communism.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't like he was like, oh, all communists are suppressing. It was
Right.
like in the war he was fighting, those people were pushing their ideologies too much.
And in the book we actually see that they say like the capitalists, like he refers to like the capitalists were the people in the olden days that he remembers, that he describes with the top hats. Like people would have to give him a little bow like with their top hats on.
Yeah.
So yeah, like we said, he kind of goes through a lot of different political ideas, ideologies, different parties. So he mentions like capitalism by name in here and like socialism by name, but like we said when we were looking into Orwell, he had a lot of different ideas of what these different things meant, especially like I said, things were obviously different in 1940
40s,
when he 49 when he wrote this.
Yeah.
1949 versus as if I don't know if he was alive now, he might write things different of who he thinks were these people in the book.
But so that was something I kept in mind because I was very aware going into this that people used it for political agendas. And to be honest with you, I don't know if it's my own bias, but I couldn't find like one party being pushed up, or not one party, but one idea being pushed up. Like he never really said anything pro or con capitalism. He was just inquisitive about it. He was asking people, was it better or was it not? And no one would give him an answer.
Nobody could answer him. And that's actually something that's like a recurring thing in the novel, that Winston can't find any answers as to, is life better now than it was before?
Yeah.
And nobody knows.
And even with socialism, there's never really negative about socialism. It's negative about how the party used socialism to their advantage. So it was more like Goldstein saying like they said it was socialism, but really it was them doing this. So that's not socialism. That's
so
them
essentially
abusing the
everything
name.
he's saying is like everybody is going to use some kind of ideology to disguise whatever their real intentions are. So whatever they decide to implement is under the guise of capitalism, socialism, communism, but it doesn't mean that it's right, and it doesn't mean that it's actually any of those things.
Yeah,
which is something that kind of Winston comes to figure out. Like, none of these things are what people say they are.
The point is freedom.
Yeah,
to some extent. Something I thought interesting. Well, I have a few things that I find interesting. First of all, again, another question: is Goldstein real?
Yeah, that's a good question.
That's a tougher one.
Yeah. I mean, in my opinion, I would say that maybe somebody by the name Goldstein did exist at one point in time, but I don't necessarily know or believe that he was the sole writer of the little manifesto we get, or But like you said, like he
alive.
was kind of used like as a martyr, which is kind of interesting because I think they say specifically that the way that they torture people is designed to not create martyrs.
Yeah.
Because they don't want people to rally behind someone like Goldstein. So that's kind of interesting. I think that Goldstein is, even if he was a person, that now he's used more as an ideology again.
Yeah. I think it's like what they want is to put a face behind like evil.
Yeah.
And that's the real point of him. So
Right.
whether he existed or not, that's the point.
I mean, you wonder even like, is the Brotherhood even real? Is any of it even real? Or is it how the party picked out who could like change viewpoints, who could be a free thinker,
right?
And so they just had to have,
and they
some
just need
sort
a
of
way
scapegoat.
to take down the free thinkers.
Yeah, because people tend to not rebel unless they know they can like find a way out. Like,
yeah,
it's harder to be the first one than to be like the fourth or fifth or sixth. You know, like, so I don't even know my own opinion. I'm still thinking about it, but
so all of these like people who are supposed to be leaders of parties don't even exist. And then people who we find out are like important, as if like if we were to believe before we know O'Brien is part of the party versus him being part of the Brotherhood, like nobody knew who O'Brien's name was versus like in the party or in the Brotherhood. So he's like an unknown name. Nobody knows who's a part of this. Like they're just kind of an idea, a myth, a legend, something that kind of, I don't know, continues on with history. And so everybody, like we said, the same way that people take this novel and try to make it into whatever they want for their agenda is the way that these two different political parties that we see in the novel kind of do.
I like that connection.
I almost wonder too, like,
I like that connection a lot.
Does it even matter? Because we see like with the idea of doublethink, it's almost like it doesn't matter what reality is reality, it's what's right now that's being said.
Yeah.
So does it matter if Big Brother's real? Does it matter if Goldstein's real? All that matters is they're saying it's real. And I guess to them it is. To that, like, it still changes your opinion. I don't know if that's how I personally think, but I feel like that's something the brother could be, or not the brother.
And I will say this is just our personal plea to every English teacher to stop taking this book and taking it and using it for your own political agendas.
Yeah.
Please stop doing that.
It's not about, like, for us at least, like, after reading it and reading about Orwell, it does not feel like it's pushing any one political agenda. It just feels like, don't push people down.
Anti-dictatorship, and that's about it.
Anti, like, not having the people involved. Anti-dictatorship, anti-totalitarianism.
Right.
Just not having some sort of freedoms, not having some sort of rights. And I can tell people are going to take that some way, but it's literally don't take it any way other than, like, don't have a dictatorship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been seeing a lot, honestly, like, with social media, people, like, just being like, this is exactly like 1984. Like, look, they warned us. And I'm like, did they know?
Didn't you also have, like, a pretty interesting social media connection with the book?
Yeah, so, well, first I did want to share this quote from George Orwell. Let me find it.
Okay.
Because just as an example, it's the socialism one, right?
Yeah.
Like, as an example, just as people have used it against communism, against capitalism, they've used it against socialism. But Alia has a very interesting quote.
Yeah, so people were using his book to say, like, this anti-socialism, and he literally said, 1984, my recent novel is not intended as an attack on socialism. So he literally said it. People shouldn't be using it one way or the other. And I think that this is the go-to book right now to use. So
he's rolling in his grave.
So, yeah, and the other thing I wanted to say is, like, I was kind of on some forums and just, like, reading what other people had to say about the book. And everyone's just, like, you know, throwing that, this is 1984 right now, we're living in it. So a lot of people thought that Facebook is Big Brother. And I want to know what you guys think about that, or like Amazon is Big Brother, or all of those big corporations.
Yeah.
And I kind of see what they're saying. Yeah.
The mouse.
Or Apple, as we're looking into
Apple,
an iPhone.
yes.
As we're like Apple Podcasts.
We're looking into our iPhone.
Right.
And that's this whole
on
time
your Mac.
My mind is like, I'm looking into a telescreen. Hello. I don't know.
I love that idea. I mean, not that I love that could be real.
I
but
think it's important to keep it in mind. And just for me, it's like, don't let things get too far. Like, you don't have to, like...
And
So,
that maybe we need to, as people, take more action before
action,
the only
exactly.
action is to be in a fake brotherhood that just
Right.
kind of exists in a whisper.
Because I think we can see how social media can get to that point because,
Mhm.
you know, we are being listened
News
to.
can be changed.
Yeah.
Opinion,
Alexa, hey, what's up?
I know. Don't even say that because there are Alexas here and it would start talking and start the show for me. But no, I mean, if you think about it, with newer technology and media, there is news created just the way he creates news.
Right.
And I feel like that's why people get all up in arms. And it's like,
Right.
but it's the original, we have to remember, hasn't exactly been incinerated in a furnace and forgotten forever. So, like, we
Exactly.
can still find it if you just
We
take
still
the
have the
effort to look
facts.
for
They
it.
still exist.
They're still
Everything
there.
exists on the
Yeah.
internet.
Yeah,
Cannot
it's
be
really
deleted.
hard to delete
Yeah,
that stuff.
we aren't throwing our old facts in the incinerator as soon as people decide they want new ones.
Mhm.
So, luckily, we can go back and fact check.
You just have to make sure you don't get past that point.
Right.
That's our view, though. You can have a different one.
Of course.
I mean, if you'd rather not fact check, that's
You
your
can
own
tell it.
prerogative.
You don't have to fact check. I mean,
Whatever. If you don't want to cite your sources, that's your own bibliography.
we won't read it. Just, but that being said, you can comment. But we would
Yeah.
like for your sources.
Yeah.
Ours is this book. Just
Yeah,
kidding.
I was
I
gonna
live by this
ask,
book.
before I guess we get into any other themes that we haven't touched on while we
Mhm.
were talking in the plot,
Mhm.
is there any specific part of the novel that would be like your favorite part or something you found really interesting that stands out? Alia?
I mean, this might be like cliche, but just like the ending where he's like, he loved Julia, and now he loves Big Brother. I think
Mhm.
that was like, oh dang, he's in it.
Not the
Yeah.
rats.
Yeah.
Not the rats.
Well, I did say the rats earlier because who doesn't like
Who
rats that
doesn't
can
love
eat
a rat?
you? Yeah. So
Remy.
I always like some gory stuff. So
Ooh.
having
Oh,
that
he does
happen,
love Remy.
I do.
Ratatouille.
Ratatouille.
For
You
those
do like
who
gory
don't know.
I like gory stuff. Yeah, so I thought that part like was interesting, but the ending
Yeah.
really solidified, you know, how
Indeed.
deep he was.
Honestly, I feel like my favorite or most interesting part of the novel would be probably when he first writes in the diary.
Mhm.
Just because, like I said, I did read this before, but again, it's been a hot second since I was
Mhm.
16 and reading this for school. But I guess I didn't remember that right away he had started writing like "Down with Big Brother" in all caps over and over again. So I guess that kind of just shows like if someone isn't completely, like we said, like he kind of is at risk for being someone who would get reported to the thought police because he's
Mhm.
older. And like we said, the kids will often rat on their parents. Rat, good choice of
Rat.
words. So like they will like turn in their parents because they're the ones who are completely indoctrinated. So I don't know, it's just interesting that he still holds on to something that was like anti-party or insog. I don't know how to say it. Yeah, anti like the government, but you know, he had never been around anybody who shared those same ideals, or it's all based off of his memory and whatever he has to go off of. So I just thought like opening up strong with that, like he has this like deep-seated hatred for something that he pretends to tolerate every day, like just kind of open up the novel in the first like 20 or 30 pages or so. I think honestly that's still my favorite part.
Okay, before I get to mine, I have two things. First of all, do you think his hatred of rats is because he doesn't want to be ratted on? Honestly,
He doesn't
that
want
was
to be
good.
I'm
ratted
not
out.
gonna let go of that idea. I'll think about it for a while. I'll ruminate on it.
Oh my god.
I'll dream about it.
I will, yeah, for sure. Don't listen to me talk in my sleep. Don't rat me out. No, the second one though was not to sound like the lamest English major ever, but I feel like there is power in writing. Like, I don't know, for me, like, it feels very cathartic
Yeah.
to, like...
Just to write, like, the way that it describes him writing over and over and over again. If you've ever been someone with writer's block,
Yeah. And
that kind of thing is very
I don't know,
helpful.
I'm also not very good at, like, totally expressing myself sometimes to people.
Yeah.
But for some reason I'm writing, I can completely.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's
Just
just
like a different facet of
yeah,
yourself.
almost that separation, but like
Mhm.
not, is very interesting. So I can see why that's a good point.
Yeah.
Mine isn't a major plot point, but it was kind of a point that made me question the background of the, not question, but like think about, okay, well, what's the core of this? And it's when they discuss the importance of education or the lack of education with the proles.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to remember exactly where it was. I think it was when talking about the proles and how it might have been what Goldstein was saying, but basically that in order to keep the peace, there has to be a lack of education. And maybe I'm using my bias, so by all means don't believe me. But it just made me think of how, like, okay, well, if they were educated, they would know to rebel. They would know how to rebel. And so that almost to me feels like not even just the point of, oh, don't have like a total totalitarianism. Did I say that right? I feel like I did.
Yeah.
But also have education, have learning. And I feel like that's something you see today.
I was about to say.
Is like,
that's very current to the climate.
I don't know if like the trying to be an English teacher in me, or you tried to be an English teacher in me, is like, we need education, but like, we do.
I mean, if you disagree, I'm a little concerned, because education is really important.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and it's just like,
and that doesn't necessarily mean that has to be like higher education or whatever, but like
education.
I mean, education in general for young people especially.
So I just thought it was interesting. He even like back in, I mean, obviously people always known this, but like when this book was written, he still knew like education is kind of the key of people protecting themselves and knowing how to defend themselves. And that's why sometimes corrupt governments will pull away education.
Right.
Because with people like Winston, he has some education, and because he has his other hierarchical needs met, whatever.
Yeah.
You know, he's able to have that free thinking and think ideas of like, well,
what
he wants.
Yeah, that kind of goes into something in the book that Winston actually mentions, is that they're not supposed to have a lot of free time, because free time leads to thinking, and thinking leads to rebellious thoughts.
But the proles are allowed to have free time
because
they're not educated enough to have
because their free
thoughts.
Time is preoccupied with other things that they don't have.
It won't be the thought of rebelling, whether that's because they don't have their needs met or because they're not educated.
Winston and Julia both are required, or not that they are required, but they essentially are required, because if they are not there volunteering at different things, then it's seen as suspicious, and like, you know, they could be turned into the thought police. So like they both kind of volunteer, and they go to this little like community center and interact with other people, and they do like chess club, and they play ping pong with each other.
I know, I thought that was funny. Why ping pong?
Yeah, honestly I thought that was interesting, because they mentioned it a few times, and I was like, is there anything to that? Maybe not, but maybe it's just they were playing ping pong.
Was that the thing in the 40s in Britain? Ping pong?
Who knows?
Table tennis?
Any person alive in England in 1940, let us know,
please.
Like traveled in time to tell us.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's most of my stuff though. Like,
Yeah, so that was most of like the themes we kind of wanted to touch on.
Something that like just came to my mind, because you're talking about the proles and how like education is so important. I feel like some people even use this book as like, look at the uneducated people and like the proles, and like, look how terrible and disgusting that they are because they can't think for themselves. But it's really like they weren't even provided with the education to think for themselves. So it's more of like, I'm pitying them than anything. I'm not looking at them in a negative way.
Yeah, that kind of goes to how you were saying social media being like, we're living 1984, they warned us, because they think they're better than the people they're trying to warn.
Yeah, so I think that just kind of goes with like how people are using this for their agenda.
For sure.
I pity the proles, if anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like though I would have been jealous of them if I was Winston.
Oh yeah, they're partying.
Like the way that Winston describes it is that he is almost jealous of them.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if that's bad to say, because it is like they are suffering.
Right.
Like, let's not pretend like they're not
like
suffering.
they literally don't know if they're gonna have food. But
but I guess it just depends like what matters to you. I don't know. But
ignorance is bliss.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so another thing that's kind of interesting is
that
so there's bombs that are repeatedly dropped throughout Oceania that they kind of just mention in passing. Like it's not even a huge event.
Usually in the proles areas too, right?
So they say like there is one moment that Winston is walking, and then he actually sees that happen. And so like a bomb goes off where there was like a playground of like where prole children would be. And so later it's kind of implied that they actually aren't at war with anyone, and it's just them dropping their own bombs on on themselves. And so that's not confirmed, but that's what they think could possibly be happening. And I would say that that's pretty likely, considering that it does only happen in the prole areas, especially in a playground targeted at children who are the youth who are the most important.
Oh.
So
The infanticide of it all.
Oh. Dun, dun,
Watch
dun.
Frankenstein.
watch our Frankenstein episode if you
So
haven't
know what that
already.
means.
Like and subscribe.
Follow, like, subscribe, comment. If
Give
you
us
like
a review
us.
on iTunes. Yeah, so that's, I guess, kind of the themes we had for today. Was there any other like last themes or motifs or anything we wanted to touch on before we kind of go into anything else?
You know, I wish, and like again, this is gonna sound so annoying, but I don't care. I feel like when I do these and I read these, my mind is like, what cool thing can we come up with that isn't already obvious? Because like the obvious is the government, the obvious is the topic of that, and like with Frankenstein and other books, like you can do that, but with this one, it was hard for me to come up with like
a deeper meaning that hasn't already been found. Been found before.
Like you can come up with little motifs and like little ideas, but not like a full blown thesis. I couldn't come up with any. So if you guys have any, please tell us. That'd be so cool. I'll probably continue looking at it and reading into it, because I know I saw a lot about like his feelings and caring about himself and selfishness, and maybe that could be another reason why we lead to like such dangerous lives.
Oh, that's an interesting point.
Or even like complacency. I know I thought that with like The Handmaid's Tale, and when we read that one, we'll probably talk about that too. But like the complacency of like the proles, but again, like why are they complacent? They don't know, they're not educated, so it could just be the education. Maybe the education thing hasn't been talked about. I didn't Google it enough to know. I just kind of thought about it on my own. But I know like the nerd in me is like, let's find our own answer, and I don't know if we did or not. So for me, I'm like, but describes my feeling with a sound instead of words.
Yeah, that's fine. I think it's
agree.
the same idea across. Okay, so I guess that's generally our ideas on like different themes or what things might have meant in the book. We can kind of go into maybe like the cultural impact, which we've kind of already talked about. As we said, like people kind of utilize this book today now even more than ever for their own agendas, and you know,
especially
twist it to how they want it to sound.
Surveillance is always growing too, so every time there's a new
surveillance
so
necessarily like no matter what's going on in the political world, we are being watched right now.
I mean, we are
and listened to.
We definitely are. I mean,
we all carry a tracking device with us.
I know.
Like if you have a like cellular device, people know where you are.
We have these cameras here.
Yeah,
we're watching you.
We are.
We're watching you, watching us.
Watching you, watching us.
Well.
Watchingception. That's really the theme of this. We're gonna see how we can get
there is
Inception.
a 1984 movie. I know, Alia, you said you watched like a highlight of
like
it.
Clips of it.
Is there anything that you thought was interesting from the movie that might be different or similar to the book, or gave you a better understanding of the novel?
Not too much. It was pretty like, I guess, just disturbing. Like I feel like they made it as disturbing as they could because they wanted to get the point across that this is like a really messed up society. And like I said before, like the hate speech thing, I was like, I'm very creeped out by this scene. I don't
Do you think that seeing it versus reading or listening to it, like without any visual, was like different or like increased how frightening it seemed to you? Or
I feel like the hate speech thing, so I kind of pictured it differently in my head, but it was like very like graphic and like a whole bunch of people congregating and being like as vulgar as they could be.
Yeah. Does it make it seem like more realistic once you like see it?
Maybe, yeah, because like you don't want it to like be realistic, I guess, but then when you see it, you're like, oh, I could see this society happening. Like, you could get there one day, hopefully not, but
don't be complacent, be educated.
Educate. That's the main line.
There's also the one show that you kind of know about.
Oh, we were talking about that. So
Big
reality television, if you're a fan. Big Brother. None of us.
Which I never connected, honestly, until today.
Yeah, that's really funny that I didn't know that you didn't know that it was from 1984 and that you thought it was something like different.
I never knew what the thing was about either. I didn't realize all that. So
I mean, I could be wrong about like the premise, but I'm pretty sure it's like America's watch. You guys probably have seen it, so I'm sorry.
So you don't have to explain it.
But yeah, like America's watching these contestants compete and like voting for them, and it's kind of like we America is Big Brother and watching. So I thought, that was interesting.
Yeah.
That it's
I just
really
think it's interesting that something like 1984 led to a reality show, reality television that's been on for like how many seasons? I want to say like maybe more than 20 seasons.
Oh, definitely more than 20, I would say.
Yeah,
creepy.
Like a bunch.
We should watch it.
I feel like it's very contradictory, kind of what the book means. I don't know, like. the books about like probably don't do as much surveillance, and here we are making a show about surveillance and enjoying it. And it goes back to my point about how are we all Big Brother? Are they all Big Brother?
Oh,
That
yeah,
show
yeah,
makes
yeah.
us Big Brother.
Yeah.
So maybe the writers who made that knew that point of like,
We are Big
you
Brother.
know, the society is Big Brother, so now we're Big Brother.
Yeah,
Because one person can't survive unless they have a following.
that's true.
So
Yeah, so I
that's
guess
all I had to say, really.
ending on that note of reality television,
Saying we're gonna watch it.
yeah. Let us know if you're a big Brother fan.
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
And if I got that story wrong, I'm
Or
so sorry. But that's
a
what I think it is.
1984 version of Big Brother fan if you just like
Yes.
dictatorships.
Let us know. Sound off in the comments.
Or want to know, I guess.
Yeah.
A little
We're
scared,
open to
but-
a discussion. I am.
Okay, yeah. So I think that's gonna
Mhm.
wrap it up generally for 1984.
Thanks for joining us, Alia.
Thank you for
Yeah,
having
thank
me.
you.
It's been a
Hopefully
pleasure.
we'll see you again sometime
Yes.
soon.
Maybe Fahrenheit 451.
Yes, I really like that book, so I'm
That
totally
kind
in.
of ties into this kind of general
Yeah.
dystopian aesthetic.
Yeah.
Maybe we just bring you for all the dystopias.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yeah, so I think that's gonna wrap up our thoughts on George Orwell's 1984. So actually next time we're going to be discussing Lois Lowry's The Giver,
Ooh.
which
Such
is
a good book.
yeah,
I'm
which is
excited.
a great one.
You'll have
Another
to just listen.
dystopian
Yes.
book. So I promise maybe after this one we won't do another dystopia, not 3 dystopias right in a row, but
It's rough.
we just
We won't be your high school teachers where you
Yeah.
just only ever read dystopias all the time.
yeah.
Yeah.
Look out for the Christmas season. This will be our gift to you. This next podcast
We're
episode.
giving to you, the giver.
The Giver, yeah.
A gift that keeps on giving.
So definitely read up, take some notes. Let us know any comments about this book, maybe our last book, Frankenstein, or if you have any questions for us for The Giver, let
Anything
us know.
you want to talk about on the giver?
Yeah.
Like,
Let us know on
message us
any of our social
beforehand.
media. Everything will be linked in our description box on YouTube and in our description on any podcasts and
I
where
would
you
point
listen to us.
somewhere, but
I would point, but also we have listeners, so it's in the description box of
And I
whatever
don't know how to do
media
that.
you are using.
I think it's here.
I don't know. No, I don't know how to play that.
So all of those links to all of our social media will be there. So, you know, if you have any questions of any upcoming books,
Mhm.
any previous books, let us know.
Recommendations.
Yeah, so let us know anything you want.
Mhm.
And I guess that's going to wrap us up today. So,
Wrap
again,
up our thoughts.
Thought
Right.
police.
All right.
don't get caught, guys. So that's us for today.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Don't get caught by the thought police. Love you.
Bye.